Hey, welcome to this edition of Thrive. I hope it finds you well, and I hope it finds you expectant for what lies ahead of us as we are hopefully moving towards level 2 and being able to resume life, so to speak. And I think therein is the issue, isn't it? I think that so much of our life and so much of our thinking reflects that our attitudes to how we've seen this time of COVID. We think of our bubbles as being a pause in life, almost like an interruption, isn't it? We were tracking along, we were doing what we were doing, and then this was forced on us, and it's been a while, but now we're going to pick our lives up again. And it's like we've seen this time of lockdown as a pause, as life's pause button in the game of life. But, I've been thinking around it, and I thought, what if we were to see it as a God's gift to us? I know it might not have felt like it at times, but what if we were to think of this time of lockdown as God's gift to us in terms of, rather than being a pause button, that it's life's reset button? Because certainly I know that that's what many of us have been doing, isn't it? So many of you have reset some priorities because things that you thought were important and things that you had established prior to this, you're now beginning to see them in a different light, and you've realized that actually I need to reevaluate my priorities in the midst of what's going on and against the backdrop of the uncertainty of life, and you've made some changes, you've reset them. Likewise, some of you have reset some values. Sort of allied with that, you've realized some things that you thought were important aren't important, and you've made some changes, you've reset them. And certainly through this time of lockdown, most of us have had to reset relationships, haven't we? We've had to learn to relate differently and to interact with one another differently. We've had to reset some of the expectations and some of the patterns that we'd fallen into, because being in lockdown, it just exposes them for what they are, and it's brought us up against one another, and we've had to learn to not adjust, but to reset and to see each other as we truly are. And I think that's a good thing. And in fact, for me personally, I think of this as this lockdown as a reset button, because it's certainly helped me reset how I see people. I hadn't realized how easy it is to get into the habit of seeing people but not seeing people. We see people but we walk past them. We don't stop. We see a body but we don't see a person. We talk to people, but we don't really engage with people. And I think it's important for us to see what's happening in that dynamic, and I think it needs to be reset, because when we miss seeing people, we are missing something really significant, because not only are we not seeing people, as a consequence of not seeing people as people, just as bodies, as whatever it is, when we walk down the street, we put labels on them, don't we? And we see a person in a suit, they're a professional. We see a person in overalls, and we have a mindset around that. We see a person with a begging, and we have another category for that, don't we? And we see people in those terms, and we don't see the person. And when we don't see the person, we're really not seeing ourselves either. Because I think that for us to be able to walk past people and to put people in categories rather than see them as people means that for us as Christians, we've become really familiar with our faith, to the point where it's no longer functioning the way that it should function. You see, if we live out of the reality that it's no longer we that live, but Christ that lives in us, then it's going to shape the way that we see ourselves, and it's going to shape the way that we see other people, because we're going to see Jesus in them. We're not going to see a person in a suit. We're going to see Jesus in a suit. We're not going to see a person in overalls. We're going to see Jesus in overalls. We're not going to see a beggar. We're going to see Jesus sitting on the ground, inviting people to have a conversation about priorities, about life, about compassion, about ethics, and all those sorts of things. And the reason I say that is that one of the things that happened in the first week of lockdown for both Anne and I was that we were talking and we realised that we've both been thinking about the exact same things, that we had been talking around the fact that this in our first week we had a profound we developed a profound awareness of what it must be like for refugees, because we went into our lockdown with some sense of uncertainty, with a sense of insecurity, with a whole lot of questions around what will the future hold, or will we be okay? You think you are, but because there's so many things swirling around. And we became aware that what was or what is but a momentary time for us, for many people, that's their everyday norm. That is their life. Only it's compounded by the fact that we were able to stock up on things like toilet paper, and no, we didn't. We could stock up on canned goods. We could make sure the fridge had food in it, the pantry had food, and that we would be okay. Refugees, their life is like being in lockdown, but without all of the things we take for granted. They don't even have the bed. They don't even have the comfort of a couch. They don't have the luxury of being able to turn on TV. A lot of people, they're in their camps, and they're trying to break through their lockdown into a future. And I the reason I say that is that it made me begin to realize that without becoming aware of it, I think so many of us have bought into the politics of people rather than seeing Jesus in people. We see people through our political lens, and so that shapes our response. It shapes the value that we assign them. It shapes the way that we think that we see their rights and all those sorts of things. And for me, I think that attitude, that behaviour needs to be reset, because the reality is that you and I both know that the same Jesus who lives in us lives in them, that the same God who created us in his image created them in his image, the same God who fearfully and wonderfully knitted them together and planned their life with and for great things and with exciting things and all of the things that you and I take for granted. He planned it for them as well. It's just the difference between a refugee and you and I is circumstance. And I think if we were to begin to see people as people instead of through political eyes or through the lens that you may have, that it would begin to change so much of our life for the better. And we would come out of this ready to engage as the way that God intended for us to engage. I've been thinking around Matthew 25, where Jesus talks about sheep and goats, and it's a whole thing around judgment. It's about standing before the throne of judgment, getting into heaven, all those sorts of things. And Jesus says that one of the criteria that he judges people on is the way that they responded to people, to life. And he says to a group of people, when you did it to the least of these people, you did it to me. In other words, the people that didn't recognize Jesus and other people, that didn't see people as people but saw them as refugees, therefore, or saw them as unemployed, therefore, saw them as people who were whatever category you want to use, rather than as people. These were the people that disqualified themselves, that failed to live out of who God had called them to be, and therefore could not enter into their eternal rest. And I think I think it's really sad that so many of us we have a faith and we love God, but we don't allow it to shape every sphere of us, and so we don't live out of the fullness of who we are, because we're too busy looking through the political. We're too busy looking through social lenses. We're too busy looking through economic lenses. We're too busy looking people to categorize people to actually see people. And yet we have an opportunity through this time to reset that and to come out and start seeing people as people. Start seeing people who need help for no other reason than they need help. We start to see people that have been put across our paths because we have the means to help them, just as Jesus has helped us. And so I say that because, I think that one of the shifts that's taken place in the world through this COVID is that is that people are starting to question. They're starting to question the politics of identity. They're starting to question some of the categories that we used to work with, because they've actually created gaps, haven't they? Haves and have-nots. So they've actually polarized people. And this time of lockdown has showed us that is not a healthy position to live out of. That is not good for society, that we actually need to move beyond that and see people as people. We need to stop categorizing. And it begins with you and I. We need to see ourselves as fearfully and wonderfully created by God and loved, not as inferior to someone or superior to someone else. We just need to see ourselves as God sees us, so that we can begin to see other people as he sees them. And I can't help but think that if we could do that, then we're going to lead the way in the reshaping and the reforming of so many societal norms that are crying out to be fashioned afresh in the light of our experience. And so I want to encourage you to just pause and just take a step back and ask the Lord, what needs to be reset in my life? Not just what do I need to pick up again, but what needs to be reset so that I come out and start afresh, so to speak. And just see where that takes you, and just see what difference it makes to the way that you live, to the way that you engage, and to the way you see yourself and others. So God bless you. Enjoy the rest of your evening.